Taking a closer look at the prototype, basically all this is a skateboard wheel, bearings, little U-arm bracket support thing, some threaded bar along the top, another bearing, and then a little support for the bearing in like a little bearing housing type deal, and then a capped nut on top, and of course the top plate. Now, because I made this from scratch and just basically made it up as I went along and didn't write anything down, I'm now going to have to reverse engineer this to make the remaining 3. Now, intelligently, I did actually make a template for the little U-frame bendy wheel bracket thing. So we're going to use this to make 3 more brackets, and I'm also going to cut up all the other parts that I need. Okay, me ducks, now we have cut everything out, we've deburred everything, the holes are drilled and tapped, we're ready to produce the bends. Now I'm going to do the initial bend on the fly press, but the tooling on this isn't really set up for the thickness of this sheet because this is 3mm. So I intend to do the first part of the bend using the tooling on the fly press, and then I'm going to sandwich this in the bench vise and I'm going to tap it around with a hammer just to produce a bit of a sharper edge. But we'll see how we go, and hopefully things will work out well. Now that all the parts are bent, I'm going to hit them with a file and some sandpaper just to get rid of any bend marks, scuff marks, hammer marks, those sort of things, because we want a nice even surface for when we paint these. That's the next job. Whilst we're waiting for the paint to dry on these, we can get started on welding up our other parts. Whilst we're waiting for the paint to dry on the wheel bracket, I'm going to start welding up the housing for the bearings. Now, the way that this works is we've got a hole in the weldable plate, and this weld-on plate basically has the bearing housing slot inside, and then I'm going to stick a couple of tacks on the top here just to hold it in place, and then I'm going to do some little stitch welds around this little T-fillet here. Then we're going to weld the bearing inside the housing. Now, before we weld the bearing inside the housing, we need to take the bearing apart, obviously because there's some plastic parts in there. We don't want them to just melt inside the bearing and render it useless. So we'll take it all apart, we'll degrease it as well so there's no grease that's going to contaminate any welding, and then we can grease it back up and put it back together. We're now at the stage where we can start assembling some of these. You might be wondering why the wheel brackets are red, and that's because after the white primer coat, I basically stopped filming everything. Complete mistake, but yeah, basically, sorry about that. But they're red now, and they're finished. So they've also got a clear coat on there as well. I went with red because I don't really know. So they're gonna be red. I need to take 2 nuts per caster and drill out the threads on them. That's because we're going to be using them as spacers, and if we keep the threads on there, it just basically wreaks havoc with assembling the thing. 2 nuts per casters, they can be drilled out first, and then we can assemble the final thing. Okay, first I'm going to take this threaded bar and I'm going to add on a nut just to the end, just sort of finger tight like that. Then I'm going to take the bracket and I'm going to thread in the thread just a little bit, and I'm going to slip on a spacer just like that. Then I'm going to take the wheel, slide that in. I'm going to push this inside the bearings, and then on top of the threaded bar I'm going to put another one of the drilled out nuts and use that as a spacer. Get that in. Yep, and we're through. Now I can put on the other nut just like that. Then everything can be tightened up, just leaving it finger tight just so we've got a bit of play for a moment. We're near the end. Now what I'm going to do to finish this off, remember the small threaded bar that we cut earlier? Its purpose is about to become clear. First you're going to take one of the nuts and you're going to thread it on. Now you might need to get some mole grips on the other side of this because you need to thread it with a 3mm clearance at least from the end. Just like that, just so it pokes up through the top. So you need that little bit of clearance because it's going to fit on the bracket like so. There you go, just like that. Next bit is the top. Now the reason we haven't painted this is because this is a weld on. We're going to have it on this way so that our little skirt fits over the nut like that. Boom. We're going to take our capped nuts, pop one of those on top, just like that, all the way down and on. Once that's on, we can tighten up the nuts on the sides. There we go. And that is one complete caster ready to be added to whatever we want. Now the way that you'd fit this is, of course, you have to drill a hole so that the cap nut can fit inside. So if you've got a piece of box section, drill your hole in your box section, weld this on so that the hole marries up with a hole in the bearing, and then you can weld that on, cover the bearing with some tape, and then you can paint this whole thing so that it all matches, and then you can add the bracket and the wheel, and that means that this whole thing will be painted together as one. Now that the casters are complete, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on what we use them for, and hit the bell for some reason. Hammer the like button for me, and one last thing, this year's been a struggle, so apologies for the delay in videos. Special thanks to Greg for the motivation, Jade, Louis, Marin, and of course my wonderful mother for all the support through this year. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.